Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Monday, August 25th, 2025. This is USA Today's The Excerpt. Today, how an army base used for World War II Japanese internment will be the nation's largest ICE detention center. Plus, new polling concerns for Trump and a crackdown on commercial truckers who can't speak English. Americans of Japanese heritage say they hear echoes of their family's forced internment in the Trump administration's newest immigration detention site. I spoke with USA Today national immigration reporter Lauren Villagran to learn more about Fort Bliss. Lauren, thanks for joining me on this.
Thanks, Taylor.
So just starting here, would you tell our listeners a bit about the immigration detention site the Trump administration has created at Fort Bliss, and how is it part of this broader effort to construct detention facilities like it?
The Trump administration is dramatically increasing capacity to detain immigrants around the country. We've seen that in facilities like the quote unquote alligator Alcatraz, like a facility that is going to be brought online for immigration detention in Indiana and others around the country. However, the administration's largest facility that it has created is now at Fort Bliss in El Paso, Texas. It is a soft-sided sort of tent facility, like sprawling white tents in the desert that has capacity to hold 5,000 people.
What does it cost, and who's there right now, Lauren?
So the contract is worth more than $1 billion. And while it is set up to hold up to 5,000 people, U.S. Representative Veronica Escobar, a Democrat who represents El Paso and whose district includes Fort Bliss, was there and said there were about 1,000 people there, all men, though she believes that women will be held there soon as well.
And what is the history, Lauren, behind Fort Bliss as an internment camp in World War II?
So, the descendants of Japanese Americans and Japanese immigrants who were detained in internment during World War II have been raising red flags all week, talking about how there are they hear real echoes of the past in the projects that are going on today. So during World War II, Fort Bliss was used as a site to intern Japanese immigrants. The site held over 100 people before they were shipped out and sent to other internment camps around the country. You know, stewards of Japanese American history say it's important to remember that history, now 80 years old, because they see echoes of it in, what's happening today.
Well, in terms of the Trump administration here, Lauren, what do they argue? Why does Fort Bliss make sense for them, and how do they push back against some of these criticisms?
Well, first of all, last year, the United States immigration detention system had bed capacity for 41,500 people on any given day. The Trump administration is looking to dramatically increase that capacity, and Congress has given them lots of money to do it, to the tune of something like $28 billion. One of the fastest ways to do that, Trump officials say, is to use the United States' immense military infrastructure. And that includes asking private contractors to set up quick, soft-sided detention sites on military bases. The one at Fort Bliss is practically at the city's edge. It's very near a highly transited thoroughfare called Montana Avenue. There are residential neighborhoods and restaurants nearby, and you can see it from the road.
All right, folks can find the full version of this story with the link in today's show notes and learn more about Fort Bliss. Lauren Villagran covers the border and immigration for USA Today. Thank you, Lauren.
Thanks, Taylor.
Twice as many Americans say they strongly disapprove of President Donald Trump's second term than those who strongly approve, according to a new poll. In a survey from YouGov and The Economist conducted earlier this month, 47% say they strongly disapprove of him, compared to 23% who say they strongly approve. In January polling, 36% of Americans strongly disapproved of Trump. The latest poll found Democrat sentiment toward the president is even stronger than Republicans, with 83% of Dems saying they strongly disapprove of him, and among his Republican supporters, 54% said they strongly approve of his performance. You can read more with a link in today's show notes. There's a crackdown underway on commercial truckers who can't speak English. I spoke with USA Today national correspondent Trevor Hughes for more. Hiya, Trevor.
Hey, good to be here.
Thanks for hopping on. So just starting with the latest news, what did the White House announce here about visa approvals for international truckers?
So the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has essentially said that they're going to pause visa approvals for international truckers. The challenge is we don't exactly know what that means. There are a number of different visas that truckers can get. You have to remember, especially on the Mexico US border, there are thousands of truckers who go back and forth every day between the factories on the Mexican side and the US side. And so it's unclear exactly how this is going to affect trucking in the United States, but I can tell you, truckers are talking about it.
Well, this visa move, how is it part of a broader crackdown, really, from the Trump administration on English language requirements in particular for commercial truckers?
The Trump administration is really targeting the trucking industry for help, for lack of a better term. They have announced a crackdown on English language proficiency, which is the highest profile thing. You may have seen the reports. Truckers around the country are being pulled over and asked, can you speak English? Can you read road signs? It follows a lot of complaints over the years from many truckers and many trucking associations that foreign truckers on our roads just don't have the ability to understand what signs mean. And we're not talking about like, speed limit 55 ahead, but a variable message board over that says, slow traffic in the left lane, or please exit here, road closed due to blizzard.
And what other measures has the Trump White House taken on trucking? We mentioned the visa move, some of this language stuff. Even beyond the language issue, what else have we seen?
There are a couple of concerns that truckers have had. And just to be clear, truckers are vital to the American society. They carry something like 70% of our goods. There isn't a thing in your house that hasn't been on a truck. And so what the Trump administration is doing affects trucking, and it affects it in very interesting ways that we don't quite understand yet. But one of the things they're doing is looking at what are called non-domiciled licenses. And that's where you get a commercial truck driving license in a state you don't live in. Under the law, you're only supposed to have one driver's license, and it's from the state that you live in. Right? I live in Colorado. I have a passenger car driver's license. If I got a commercial driver's license, I would have to turn in my regular driver's license. The Trump administration says there are some states that are too willing to give out CDLs to non-residents. They've singled out California, but I've also heard of complaints about Florida, Alabama, and Texas in some cases.
And Trevor, how are all these moves landing within the trucking community?
Most of the truckers I've talked to say they welcome attention. Right? They feel that this is an industry that doesn't get the respect it deserves, despite, again, everything in your house coming on a truck one way or the other. And so there's been a lot of support overall. There are some truckers who have concerns about how the English language requirements are being applied. For instance, Wyoming has issued hundreds of tickets, taken hundreds of drivers off the road in a couple of months. California has taken one off the road. But the truckers I've talked to say they're welcoming these moves in some cases, but they all have said increased enforcement of speeding by cars would do a lot more. There was a move at one point under the Obama administration to restrict trucks to maybe no more than 68 miles an hour, no matter where they were in this country. And truckers say that might have improved safety, but it sure as heck would be a lot better to just target the people whizzing by them at 90 miles an hour, 100 miles an hour. I've ridden with truckers, and I tell you, the cars that go by them, it is scary.
When it comes to some of the action the Trump White House is taking on trucking, Trevor, what are critics worried about here?
Critics are primarily worried about uneven enforcement of the English language requirements, right? If you have states that are really aggressively enforcing these rules, these laws, and then other states that are not, you create sort of a very different set of structures and kinds of drivers on the road. There's also a concern because there is essentially a truck driver shortage in this country. And that's not caused by the lack of licensed drivers, but the lack of drivers willing to stay in the job. These are folks that are working long hours, they're away from home for a long time, and they get paid very, very little. I mean, I rode with a trucker once, and I watched as the bids for his freight came in, and he would lose money to take some of these loads across the country. But that's what the freight shippers were offering. And so there is a concern that if you drive a lot of truckers out of service, that could raise goods for American consumers, but it also might raise payments for the truckers, which would be good for them.
All right, we have a couple of links to Trevor's stories in today's show notes. Trevor Hughes is a national correspondent with USA Today. Thank you, Trevor.
You bet.
Law enforcement agents in California have removed thousands of illegal marijuana plants from a 13-acre grow site hidden among one of the state's vast wilderness areas. The National Park Service said rangers had detected and raided the cultivation site in 2024, but were unable to rehabilitate the site until mid-August of this year due to the presence of hazardous chemicals. No arrests have been made in the incident at Sequoia National Park, officials said, and an investigation into the illegal grow is ongoing. Rangers used hand labor and helicopter sling load operations to remove the debris. The environmental damage from the site was extensive, according to the Park Service. Investigators found creek water was diverted, and growers created large pits for irrigation. They also found evidence of poaching, hillsides that were terraced for planting, and 2 miles of illegal trails cut through the wilderness area. Thanks for listening to The Excerpt. You can get the podcast wherever you get your audio, and as always, you can email us at podcasts@usatoday.com. I'm Taylor Wilson, and I'll be back tomorrow with more of The Excerpt from USA Today.